Just want to let you know you will get a notification that comes up on your screen. Richard is good to go. Awesome. Appreciate it, Rich. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, so now that we're recording, we got it on video. So what we're going to be doing today, like I mentioned, you guys, is we're going to be going over a Microsoft customer immersion experience. Really, the primary use case for this is to really be able to demonstrate some of the latest technology that we're really focusing on when it comes to security specifically, as well as any kind of hands-on feel for what we're doing, so that you guys can actually test drive the tools yourselves. Specifically today, like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about Microsoft 365 security. And really, I want to paint a picture for why, working with Microsoft and working with their tools is going to be very beneficial for you and the rest of your organization. The reason this lab in general was created and why it's popular is just because of how important security is in this day and age, right? As everybody's working remotely, as we're moving our infrastructure to the cloud, there's a lot of other decisions, a lot of other things that we really need to take into consideration. I'll tell you, in 2019, before the pandemic, I'm assuming for 2020, the number one thing CEOs were worried about was probably how they're going to manage the pandemic. But in 2019, and years before that, security was always at the forefront. It was really the number one thing that helped that, people were staying up and waking up about at night, right? Something that really kept them up. And the reason for that is because for a lot of companies, their value as an organization really comes through their data. And so if their data is compromised, if the people inside their organization aren't taking those necessary steps to protect themselves, they can really put themselves in a position for significant loss. And so, that's why Microsoft puts such a focus when it comes to security. But really the key here, and I want to make sure this is clear, is Microsoft wants to make security simple. They talk about it all the time that the more complicated you get with security, the more prone for error your organization becomes. And so instead of really making this a very robust, complicated, security infrastructure, we want to keep it simple. Right, we want to focus on things that can really manage access to our applications, to our data, to our infrastructure that are easy to manage, easy to regulate, and work extremely effectively. Okay, and so those are some of the things that I'm going to be touching on today that I think are really some of the foundational principles when it comes to making sure your data is protected, secured, and easy to access at the same time. Because what we're trying to do here is we're trying to find a balance. How can we balance security with the ability to also collaborate and communicate and work effectively and efficiently? That's the balance we're trying to get. I see something in the chat window here. Masakazu is good to go. Awesome. Okay, I'm glad everybody's able to get here into their environment. If anybody is having any issues, please let me know. First things first, I want to keep this super simple because I want to start with the basics here. I'm going to go ahead and send out a poll here inside of this meeting because I'm curious what everybody is doing right now currently inside their organization. Specifically, I want to start off this entire presentation by really talking about the fundamental security tool that you need to employ no matter what. I am so bullish on this. This needs to happen, and that's multi-factor authentication. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to launch this poll. Hopefully you guys can go ahead and give me a response. I'm curious whether or not everybody here inside the call has actually enabled multi-factor authentication in one way or another inside of their own personal organizations. I'll tell you, for my organization, it's actually something that we didn't necessarily focus on right away. It was something that was seen as a cool tool, but we didn't really fully understand why it was so important. And so, like I mentioned, I want to start with the basics. I see right now as I'm looking at the results, I see that the majority of us have not enabled multi-factor authentication. Okay, and so this is definitely, I think, a good thing to start with. If you're not fully aware of why MFA is important, let me kind of give you a little bit of background. Microsoft security posture has transformed a bit as we've moved into the age of the cloud. And the reason for that is because before the cloud, a lot of people had their infrastructure was based off of an on-premises server, right? This is where they were hosting the majority of their information, their data, and their documents. And so what happens there is that now we're creating a wall. That was the idea. We create a wall around our information, we protect it, and that's how we secure it. But now, as people move to the cloud for the efficiencies that that can give them as an organization, right? Our data is not only living here inside of our on-premises server anymore. It is outside in the world, right? And so the key now is not about creating the fence between your data. It's about making sure that you have locks on the data that specifically employ tools that can manage identity. Okay. Microsoft Security Posture holistically. And Jackie, if you could work with who just joined to kind of give her some instructions, Annie, about how to launch the persona, that would be great. But in terms of specifically, identity, as a whole, what Microsoft is focused on is we need to make sure that not only do we know who's accessing this document, but I want to know who's accessing this document, from what location, at what time, and what are the typical, ways that somebody would be accessing this information, assuming, what they typically do, that in specific individual. And so this is what we're doing with multi-factor authentication. We're creating a way where we can confirm that, we can confirm the identities, we can make sure this is the right person. And the way that we do that is not only do we need credentials, but we need a secondary form of identification. The simple way to think about it is something that you have, something that you are, and something that you own. So in this case, right, what's something that you have? It's the credentials to get into your actual account. But then what we're going to actually be doing now is we're also going to be doing something that you own, which is going to be the Authenticator app inside of your phone. So let me demonstrate this for you. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and open up a brand new in private browser. The reason I'm going to do this is because now it's not going to have any saved cookies, and I'm going to actually have to log back into my account. Okay, so you'll see how multi-factor authentication really works and why it's so relevant. So, as we're moving here, one of the powers of Microsoft 365 is that everything is accessible from the internet, right? As I sign into my office.com, I'm going to be able to see all of my different tools inside of my suite. And the thing about that makes it great is now, again, we have the collaborative nature where I can work pretty much anywhere. But the problem with security there is that if I only have credentials protecting my data, then what happens if Jackie gets access to my credentials somehow? Maybe she does some type of phishing attempt, or maybe I leave my credentials on a sticky note on my computer. I've seen that happen a million times, right? Little things like that. Somehow my credentials get leaked, and now Jackie goes ahead and she tries to get into my account. So let's say this is the example. This is not actually me. Okay, so I go ahead, I type in my credentials. Go ahead and I go next. I type in my password. And so now Jackie is thinking, oh, wow, I'm good. I'm about to get access to everything. But here's the thing. Here is where she gets blocked. Okay. As I'm trying to sign in, guess what happens? I have multi-factor authentication enabled. And so what that does for me as an organization is I can make sure I protect myself from any kind of lost credentials. Because now, as she tries to sign in, the only way I'm actually going to give her access is that she not only has to have the correct credentials, but she's also going to have to authenticate herself in a way that is relevant. So in this case, right, I'm using what's called the Authenticator app on my actual phone. It's an application that you download just like any other app. And what it does is it receives requests for signing in. In this case, right, I need to approve this request to sign into this account. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to jump into the application. I'm going to go ahead and approve that sign in, and then it's going to use biometric authentication to actually read my face, make sure that I sign in, and as soon as it gets to go, it looks like it took too long. Okay, as soon as this is good to go, I'll go ahead and try it one more time. I'm signing in, I need to approve it. I do facial recognition. As soon as it approves my face, I'm now in and I'm good to go. And I have access to my entire suite of tools. Again, right, I not only am integrating the credential needs, meaning I need to have the correct password and the correct username, but I'm also going to be able to integrate now a form of biometric authentication. Because now in order to actually get access, I need to do some type of facial recognition, some type of fingerprint scanning, whatever it might be. And the beauty of Microsoft is they have this idea of single sign-on, right? Again, balancing security with efficiency. If we're able to not only federate the user appropriately, because we know it's the correct individual now, because we've authenticated them twice, we can now decide, okay, they're going to have access to their entire suite of products here through office.com. And that's why they come up with this concept of single sign-on. Instead of having to sign on every single time you access a different application. Any questions on that, you guys? I just think that's a fundamental principle that you just need to start with. If you haven't enabled multi-factor authentication already as an organization, you are putting yourself at extreme risk. And that's just, that's what all the data shows at least.
I know we had quite a few people join while you were talking about the multi-factor identification, and I know that's a super awesome tool, but just to make sure, Janet, Dan, and Savita, that you're good to go with the personas, or if you have any questions on those.
Absolutely. Savita's here from the groupware team, but everybody else who actually joined, Jackie was gracious enough to put the link into the chat window for you. I was talking about multi-factor authentication, and we haven't used this demo lab just yet, so you're not too late. But when we get into some other topics here, there's going to be a couple dashboards like Secure Score that I'm going to review in about 5 minutes. That is going to be cool for you to actually have access to yourself. So that link is actually going to take you to this page. It'll say Customer Immersion Experience at the top. Just go ahead and type your name in. And then the available personas, again, these are all fake accounts, right? They're in this demo lab. The available personas will actually go ahead and be available. All you're going to have to do is click on the blue launch persona button, like here with Diego, or here with Miriam, or here with Joni. And that's going to go ahead and actually launch that demo lab where you can see, as I share my other screen, access to an entire Microsoft 365 environment. So if you're having any issues there, please let me know, because we're about to jump in there for Secure Score, actually. That's the next move. But any questions on multi-factor authentication? I know it might seem simple, but as what we saw from the survey, not everybody has integrated it just yet. And I do want to make sure I hammer that point down. Definitely something that you should do. This actually brings into play, if you've ever heard the term Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory is a cloud-based Active Directory that you can use for these accounts inside your organization. And what you're doing here is you're essentially having a list of authenticated users inside of your account. And you have two different pieces to it, right? You've got the authorization, meaning you've got the correct credentials and you're able to actually make sure that they are who they say they are and sign them in. But then you've also got the second piece that you can control through Azure Active Directory, which is called the authentication. So, now that we've authenticated and we know who they are, based on who that user is in my environment, I'm going to be able to control now what they have access to. Because of course, right, if I am, let's say, the HR manager, I'm in charge of everything, my access is going to be different than maybe my assistant, for example. You don't want everybody inside of your organization to have the same policies and the same rules, because then you don't have the best level of security. And so these are, a few other things that you can weave in here when it comes to multi-factor authentication. But the key here is that it's all based on identity management. We want to make sure that not only do we know who's accessing what, but where they're accessing it from and what their typical habits look like, so that we can make sure that if there's any potential risks, we can alleviate those concerns appropriately. So definitely something you want to integrate if you haven't done it just yet. But this is actually a really nice segue into what we call Microsoft Secure Score. So this is where I'm going to want to make sure everybody actually has access to this demo environment. I'm going to go ahead and open up my Microsoft Edge. So make sure you go ahead and open up Microsoft Edge in the demo lab. If it's your first time opening it, it's going to ask you to confirm and to continue the sign in. Please do that because then you're going to make sure that when you're browsing the web here, you're going to have access to all the information for that specific account. In this case, I've already done this, and you can see this right here. I know it's connected because it has my little face icon in the top right, and it says Megan, right? So as soon as you're good to go there, then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go to that first dashboard, which is actually where Secure Score is at. Unfortunately, I am unable to copy and paste specifically from our environment here into the lab. So you're going to need to type this out, but I'll go ahead and I'll put this here into the chat window. It's https security.microsoft.com. I'm going to go ahead and put this here in the chat window so you have it. And then you'll see I'll type this out myself. So https / security.microsoft.com. All right. Again, because I'm signed in here on my web browser, I am now going to get all the information for this account when I log into this page. If you haven't signed in using with those credentials to the web, you're not going to be able to see any of the information that's actually here on the back end. So let me go ahead and refresh. Oh no, the data is not available. There we go. Okay, so it's calculating my secure score. If we have any issues, please make sure you go ahead and double check this. I might actually show you, why this is so relevant, why I think it's important. It's preparing all the information. So let me actually just take you back here to the beginning. So if you're looking here, you're looking at what's called the Microsoft 365 Security Center. Okay, and this Microsoft 365 Security Center specifically is really cool because this is where you can actually see all the information that's relevant to you here in your security suite. You're going to be able to see a holistic understanding of what's going on inside of your environment and what actions you might be able to take to alleviate any of those threats. So we have information here on any kind of ongoing incidents. I can see actions that have been taking place that I can maximize, minimize, stop, or go ahead and change. I can see reports on my specific users in my account and how that deals with my security. We have this thing for secure score. I'm hoping this loads up here. If not, let me go ahead and exit out and try it again. Sometimes the remote sessions have issues, but this is a really cool dashboard I want to make sure I can show you. All right. Let me go ahead and just show you my dashboard then. Just give me 1 second. Let me log into my account so you can see why I really like this so much. So if you come in here, I'll go ahead and just go to office.com. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and open up security.office.com. Oh, I can actually copy paste. Let me do that. So what you're going to be able to see here when you come into the secure score, okay, is you're going to be able to see a really good understanding of your current security. Okay, this was explained to me in a very funny way that I actually really enjoyed, which was, this is almost like your credit score when it comes to security. And what they mean by that, and this is a great sentence that really describes it, right? Microsoft Secure Score is a representation of your organization's security posture and your opportunity to improve it. And so ultimately what you're going to be able to see here, what kind of telemetry you're going to be able to see is information that specifically details, what specific steps you've taken inside of your environment that are helping secure what you have. And then on top of that, where can I improve? Where do I have some potential misses? What potential issues do I have when it comes to security? Right, there's a few different pieces to this that I want to quickly run through. You'll see right away that this overview section actually gives you a complete picture of your entire secure score, right? It gives you all the individual sections. But what I wanted to go to is I actually wanted to go into each of these individual sections so that you see why it's so relevant. So right away, let's go ahead and let's click on improvement actions. Okay. Right away, what you'll notice is that it actually is going to give you a specific list of relevant improvement actions that you can take to manage your secure score. So it's going to tell you, okay, you've done this, but you haven't done X, Y, and Z. It's actually going to list all of these potential actions that you can take as an organization to secure yourself, and it's going to rank them from most important to least important. And again, what's really cool is it's very prescriptive. If I open up on any one of these, so for example, I can open up, we were talking about MFA here. Ensure all users can complete multi-factor authentication for secure access, right? So it's going to tell you exactly why this is so important. You notice this is number 1, right? It says multi-factor authentication helps protect devices and data that are accessible to these users. Adding more authentication methods such as the Microsoft Authenticator app, which I demoed today, increases the level of protection if one factor is compromised. And so again, this is another way to make sure we can, confirm identity, the identity of the person who's accessing those resources. That's the key. And so again, what I mean by it's prescriptive is if you look, right, it's going to tell you where this stands in terms of your action plan that you created and where you wanted to move. But more importantly, you're going to be able to see, okay, what specific category is this affecting? In this case, this is going to be affecting identity. What product is this going to be relevant for? Specifically, this is going to be Azure Active Directory. And what users is this going to specifically impact when we actually do this? Because this is a holistic move, obviously this is going to affect everybody inside of my Microsoft 365 tenant. And then finally, I think what's most important, right, especially if you need some support and some help on what you need to do, it actually is going to give you an implementation plan that lets you know, okay, if you wanted to go ahead and enable MFA for everybody, these are the steps that you're going to have to take in order to make this happen. And so, I think this is a fundamental, super, super effective way to shore up your bases as much as possible. This is going to give you, again, an entire action plan that you can make sure you follow in order to stay as secure as possible. And so that's what you're going to get from the improvement action section. Moving on into the history, you're going to be able to see, how your secure score has changed over time, right? If we say you see these are the 90 days, maybe we want to say, over the past 30 days, how has this been impacted? How have things changed? Additionally, it's going to let you know, how this has changed and for what reason on what specific date. So if you just want to manage to a specific goal, you have, a certain metric that you want to hit that you have in mind, this is going to be a good way for you to make sure you're sticking to that goal and being able to see, how that has evolved over time. So, I think this is just a good way to make sure you stay on top of things when it comes to where you stand with Secure Score. And then finally, what are some metrics and trends that are relevant to me? I think this is important, again, just for making sure you stay on top of what your goals are. It's going to let you know, okay, have I regressed in whatever way, and how has that impacted my organization? How has my score changed in, a certain amount of days, and maybe why? How does that impact me? But what I think is the coolest and most, effective here is the comparison trend. If you notice, Secure Score is taking information from Microsoft's entire customer base. If I give you a little bit of background, Microsoft is obviously across the world, right? But one of the crazy stats that I actually read the other day is that Microsoft is processing billions of signals every single day in order to protect, data, right? And they're getting all this information and they're analyzing it using artificial intelligence. And what's really cool about this is that Microsoft is a connected web of tools. And what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, I have a business in California, and let's say Jackie has a business in Florida. And let's say, her business in Florida gets attacked by, somebody outside the organization. And they use a brand new tool that Microsoft has not seen across their spectrum of security. Because as you know, security threats are always evolving. They're always changing. And so that's why you want to partner with a group that is able to get telemetry for events that are happening across the world. And so my point is, that person that attacked Jackie with that brand new method, Microsoft is going to unpack that. They're going to analyze it. They're going to figure it out. And all of that intelligence that they receive, all that information is going to get pushed out in an update to all of its users. So if you ever have an update on your computer, if you have an update for your software that you refuse to do for whatever reason, you're putting yourself at risk. You want to make sure you're making those updates happen within the week that you receive them. ASAP, because they're constantly getting updates on new security threats, right? So let's say, you have a threat that they learn about, and you get the update or you don't. The person who does not get the update is going to put themselves at more risk, right? And so my point being here that Microsoft is getting all these billions of signals every single day. They're learning from it. They're analyzing it. And what comes with that is also some telemetry on specific industries and what the typical type of secure score looks like for most people. Looks like in our industry, we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 28% on average, and our organization is sitting around 64%. So we're doing pretty good when it comes to an industry standard. But if you're ever interested in understanding, where I currently stand, I think this is a good place to start. But I mean, just on a holistic view, and if I'm bringing this all together, this is just a great way for you to make sure you're not missing anything. You're not, missing any boxes. You're checking all the right things, and you're staying on top of things. If you want any help with this, I do want to make sure I put out this poll in case you wanted us to go ahead and follow up with you. We do some secure score assessments for free for organizations. So if you're interested in doing something like that, please note that here in the poll, and we'll make sure to follow up with you with any ongoing opportunity. But point is, you want to make sure you stay on top of what's going on with your environment. Things happen all the time. Things change all the time. People come up with new creative ways to try and get access to your environment. And so if you want to make sure that not only are you getting all those learnings from Microsoft and integrating them into your environment, but you're also understanding where you can make actionable changes that will affect you very, very relevantly. So overall, I think secure score is a crucial piece of your strategy as an organization when it comes to security, and something you should definitely keep your eye on. Is there any questions, you guys? I want to make sure this is interactive as possible. If you guys have something, that maybe doesn't make sense, something that you want to learn a little bit more about, I think it just helps create the conversation. So I'll pause for a second. Not sure if anybody has any questions on what I've covered so far. Okay. No worries, you guys. Again, if you have any questions, we're always open to it. And we definitely want to be a resource for you in case you have any questions for us. So with that being said, let me go ahead and stop sharing that. What I actually wanted to cover next was specifically what Microsoft is doing for, like protecting specific documents. We have this saying inside of Microsoft that no matter what we're doing when it comes to security, we want to be able to automate as many processes as possible. The reason this is relevant, this is important, is because all of us as organizations are going to have access to information that is very potentially classified information that you definitely want to keep secure. Is that every document? Is that every form of data that we host? Absolutely not. But I'm sure if you're making any kind of money from customers, you probably have some, credit card information. If you have employees, you probably have social security information. You might have a lot of those different things. And so, the point here being that one of the pillars in Microsoft is we want to use artificial intelligence so that documents are not only securely organized, meaning, only certain people are going to have access to them, but on top of that, we want to make sure documents are also protecting themselves so that if there's any kind of accident where for some reason I accidentally share a certain document with somebody I should not have, the document will be protecting itself and making sure that it doesn't get in the wrong hands of the wrong person. Okay. So I went ahead and I sent another link into the chat window. Please make sure here inside your demo lab, you go ahead and type that out again. I'll do this right now myself so you can see. Because what we're going to be doing here is I'm now going to actually show you how to use the Office 365 security suite to use something called Azure Information Protection. Okay. When we're talking about Azure Information Protection, we're talking about making sure that we protect our endpoints so that data is not leaking out in different ways. In this specific case, we're going to actually be talking about classification of certain types of information. In this case specifically, we're going to be talking about classifying documents. Okay. We're talking about sensitive information that you might have as a company. One example might be the ability to actually host and secure information that has social security numbers of all the different people that work for your business, right? That might be a good example. And again, we want to automate this so that this happens automatically inside of our organization. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to go ahead and come here under classification. Again, we're in the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center, and we're going to go ahead and click on sensitivity labels. Okay, so make sure again you type in that link. I put it into the chat window. It's protection.office.com. If you want me to slow down here, I can just wait for everybody to go ahead and get there. If I'm not sharing my screen. Ollie, thank you for the heads up. I thought I was the whole time. Oh my gosh.
I was going to say something, be like, oh, do you want us to look at it?
There you go. So you see I'm here in the center. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so again, that link is in the chat window. It's protection.office.com. This is going to go ahead and give you access here to the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center. So I'll give you guys just a second. Again, inside of the remote desktop session, open up a browser and then go ahead and type in https://protection.office.com. Okay, so what we're going to be doing on here is, again, we're going to be creating what's called a sensitivity label. And the reason we're doing this is, again, we want to make sure that our documents are protecting themselves. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that any document that currently resides inside of our infrastructure is going to be automatically labeled depending on the specific information that we want to protect. In this specific case, we're going to leverage social security number information. So any document that we create going forward that has a social security number attached to it is going to automatically be encrypted and locked so that only specific users who are supposed to have access to that document can actually open it. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do this, and we're going to go ahead and test drive this here today. So click here on create a label. Okay, what you'll notice is that we're just going to go through the process here on the left hand side of actually creating this label and enabling it here inside of our environment. So we're going to keep this simple. We're going to call this NDA- your persona name. In this case, my name is Megan Bowen. So I went ahead and I just called it NDA- Megan. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing here for the display name. And then just a quick description, we're going to be protecting SSN, okay, social security numbers. And then once you have, again, the name NDA- Megan, protecting social security numbers, go ahead and click on the next. Okay, we're going to have to decide on, what the scope of this label is. Automatically, assuming you don't change any general settings, you're only going to be able to do this here through any of your files and emails that go along inside of your environment. You notice previously it was asking me to go ahead and turn on Azure Purview. That's because you're going to be able to enable this actually and extend this across your environment depending on what you have enabled. But in this case, we're going to keep it simple. Any files and any emails that fit this specific description are going to be automatically labeled. So then I'm going to go ahead and go next. What I'm going to do now, right, and what I have to decide is how do I want to protect these documents? What specific things do I want to do? In this case, number one, I want to lock it and encrypt them for people who are not supposed to have access. And on top of that, I also want to mark those files so that people, even if they do have access, can automatically see and be careful with the data, knowing that this is confidential information. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select both. And then I'm going to go ahead and move next. As you're making these rules, and of course, this is one simple example, you're going to have to decide exactly how you want to set all of this up inside of your environment. In this case, though, we have to make a decision on, what are our settings for this encryption? Do we want to be able to remove it if we need to, or, how do we want to manage that? And so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to configure these myself. So go ahead and click on configure these settings. And then I want to go ahead and I want to assign these permissions to specific users. In this case, we're going to keep this really simple. We're only going to go ahead and have this assigned to your own personal account. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and click on assign permissions. I'm going to add users or groups. And then I'm just going to select myself. And I am Megan Bowen. So I'm going to go ahead and select Megan Bowen. And I'm going to add. Depending on who your actual user is, please make sure you just go ahead and select your own user. And now you see I am managed here as a permission here inside of the group. So you actually have the opportunity here to use a double encryption key if you wanted to for regulatory purposes. You might need to have more than one key, right? And so again, what I'm showing you today is just an example of different ways you can meet specific regulatory requirements. Something you might not know about Microsoft is they actually have the most regulatory compliance certifications of any cloud provider on the marketplace. So, this is definitely something that you want to keep in mind, something that you want to do. So, this is definitely a big piece of what we do. So I'm going to go ahead and click on next now, once I've assigned it to myself. And then I have to decide, okay, if I'm going to be marking this, how am I going to be doing it? So I'm going to be turning it on. And what I want to do is I actually want to add a watermark to the document and then customize this text. Okay, what I'm going to say is it's going to say confidential in all caps, and the font size is going to be 100. It's going to be extremely easy to see. If you don't see it, you're not seeing it on purpose, right? Then I'm going to go ahead and save those settings. And then you go ahead and move next. And then as an organization, right, you have the decision. Do we want to do this manually where the user can individually select this, encryption option, or do we want to use artificial intelligence to automatically label all of this as soon as we see it fits the certain requirements? In this case, and just in general, I think automating processes is the key to efficiency as an organization. And so with that in mind, I think auto labeling pretty much any rule that you put in place is something that you should definitely be doing. That's just my personal opinion. So I'm going to turn it on. Okay. And now because we're going to be auto labeling this, we have to select specific conditions that it needs to meet in order for this to be automatically labeled. In this case, if you remember, we're going to be talking about social security numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a condition here. And I'm going to say, okay, if this content contains a sensitive information type, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on add and then click on sensitive info types. Of what? So now we have to decide what that sensitive information type is. In this case, it's the US Social Security number, which is right here, third from the bottom. And then I'm going to go ahead and press add. Now I know that if the content contains a US Social Security number, this document is going to be automatically labeled as confidential. And this is exactly where we want to be. Exactly, right? Again, automation of security. Go ahead and move next. Once you do that, you can just go ahead and move all the way to finish. You notice you can review your specific settings that you chose, and then go ahead and click on create label. Any questions so far, you guys? I want to make sure, I give you all an opportunity to ask me anything that might be on your mind. Okay, so we've created this document, right? However, what you'll notice inside of Microsoft, and this is something just to keep in mind in general, a lot of the things are not only a point where you have to create it, you also need to enable it. Okay, so we've created this rule and we created this policy that we want to put in place, but we haven't actually published this to our environment. And so the next step that we're going to have to make sure that we do is we actually go ahead and we publish this label. So you see right here under next steps, let's go ahead and make sure we publish it. So go ahead and click on publish this label. Okay. Then I need to go ahead and choose which one to publish. You see NDA-Megan is here. Then I go ahead and press add. Then I go next. I'm going to choose, okay, which users will be will this be enabled for? In this case, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to enable myself. So I'm going to click on add. I'm going to click here on Megan Bowen and click add. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and click next. You have a decision here as well. that comes up, right? You have these labels and you're making them automatic. But, as users in the environment, there may be situations where, let's say, the content that it picked up was not actually a social. It might have looked like it, but it wasn't. So it was getting labeled accidentally. We're going to be able to, turn it off if you want to, but you also want to make sure that it's not automatic. Because what if somebody's turning it off automatically, and they're the ones that are making a mistake and they don't actually realize it? So in this case, what I want to do is that if we're going to be able to actually turn this off, I want users to be able to actually provide justification for why they want to remove the label, number one. Number two, I want to require this to be on every email and every document exchange that we have, so that number one, it's automatically getting applied. And number two, if they want to remove it, they need to justify why they should be able to remove that. Definitely a big piece of what we're doing here. And then, just go ahead and give it the same name, NDA-Megan. Go ahead and move next. Review those settings and submit. Again, you remember the policy settings here, label is mandatory, and they must provide justification in order to do that. And so now, for engagement purposes, I'm going to go ahead and send out another poll here today inside of the Teams meeting, you guys. This is definitely something to keep in mind. Do your documents actually protect themselves? If they do, shout out to you, round of applause. If they don't, this is definitely something you're going to want to keep in mind. Security is not just about building fences. It's about making sure that even if you do get breached, you have specific rules in place for managing that, that potential eventuality. One of Microsoft's biggest, I'd say, rules of thumb or thought process that they do when it comes to security is they want to make sure that they can quarantine any potential threats. They're structuring their security in a way so that even if somebody gets in, we can mitigate the potential threat that can cause for our organization, right? It's all about minimizing risk, minimizing damage. And I think ultimately, pairing yourself with an organization that puts security as one of the forefront and most important things that they do is really where you want to be. Because like I said, I think the actual number, the statistic, is that over 90% of threats are typically brand new and constantly evolving. So things are not static, right? Things are changing. And so the people that you're connecting with and relying on for security need to be able to adapt as well. They need to be able to stay engaged and constantly be learning from all the telemetry they're getting from their customers. In this case, Microsoft has a massive customer base. And so they're able to pull all this information together and provide insights for the rest of their customers. It's like one big brain, right? Working against any kind of potential threats. So definitely something to keep in mind. Regardless of whether or not you end up working with Microsoft for security, whoever you are, it's got to be somebody who really knows what they're doing. Because security is not going to stop. It's not going to go away. It's going to consistently and constantly be a primary concern. I see Francis is typing, so I am eagerly excited to see what she has to say. If anybody else has any questions, any comments, please, I want to make sure this is as interactive as we can.
Yeah, just as a reminder, you're more than welcome to use the chat. You're more than welcome to unmute yourself. And then there's also that raise the hand feature that I think Andres did in the beginning of the meeting. I'll do it right now, and it makes a little box around yourself and goes from there.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Francis, I'm not sure if you're typing on accident or you just have a really long message. Feel free to just unmute and speak if you have a question.
No, I was just going to agree with you that security, it really is and should be always our primary concern. Sorry, I was just typing, but it's not going through.
No worries.
There it went.
Oh, I see it.
Thank you.
I love the insight. Thank you, Francis. Yeah, I mean, it's really scary, to be honest with you. I mean, my personal opinion, I get worried about it. But, I feel a little bit better knowing that I'm working with Microsoft. So trying to, let you guys know that it's definitely something that you should be focusing a lot of attention to. Okay, so we've talked about, helping your documents protect themselves. We've talked about putting the right rules in place and getting some understanding of, what next steps might make sense when it comes to securing my environment. let's actually talk about one of the most, I think relevant conversations that we can have when it comes to security. And that's the idea of human error, okay? Human problems. This is why simplicity is so relevant with security. You know, a lot of people try and get a little too complicated with security. They want to make it super, super, locked down. But the thing is, most of the time, you guys probably saw the news from the end of last year where there was a super sophisticated attack that happened really across the entire world. But I'll tell you, 95, 99% of the attacks do not look like that. Actually, statistics actually tell us that over 80% of actual compromised, threats actually come just from lost credentials through phishing. And so really, the primary concern here, in my personal opinion, is it's the human error element, right? When people are creating passwords, they're making them as simple as possible so that they can remember them and make it super easy on them to not have to sign in somewhere a million times. If you have a really good policy of changing your passwords every month or two, people are adding one number at the end. They're not changing the password entirely. When people are getting emails, they're not necessarily always checking. There's a saying inside of Microsoft as well that there's always somebody in some company. There's always in every company, there's somebody who's going to be willing to click on the link. Right. And so, again, we're bringing in this idea of passwords in general and the potential threat that can cause for, your business. And so I wanted to talk to you about, one of the tools that Microsoft is using here when it comes to passwordless authentication. So, I really think moving away from passwords is going to be something that the industry continues to go. It's really important for you to understand, and I appreciate the comment. Thank you. It's really important for you to understand, number one, why passwords are dangerous. We kind of touched on that, earlier in terms of the simplicity that it can cause, as well as the potential human error associated with it. But on top of that, it also makes it annoying for people to have to sign in everywhere. And so one of the tools that I think you can definitely consider, integrating into what you do is some form of biometric authentication. Okay. Biometric authentication is really just a way for you to sign in and get access to something without having to type in a password, because it's getting some type of either facial recognition, could be a fingerprint scan. Those are the two primary ways that people do it. And the way Microsoft has integrated this into the way that they work is they've integrated this into their specific devices. So if you have any kind of Windows enabled device, such as the Surface, like a Surface laptop, it's going to come fully integrated with Windows Hello. Let me just show you here on my screen an example of what Windows Hello can look like. If you're signing into a regular computer, you're going to see this as you open it up, but you're also going to see this little bouncing eye. Okay. And what this bouncing eye is it's got saved credentials that can recognize the difference between a picture and the difference between a real person, and then actually try and calculate who that real person is that's looking at the screen. And as soon as the person who it's supposed to be gets in front of the screen, and then it then goes ahead, it starts registering it, the lock, the key fits the lock, and then you get access to your entire environment. And again, here's the idea of single sign-on, because now I federated myself using facial recognition. The computer knows I am the person who's supposed to be accessing this information. And so now I'm going to be able to have access to my full suite of tools, my entire, laptop that has all the different, applications that are integrated on it. I'm now going to be able to access all of these directly through my laptop because I've already signed in using biometrics. So, this is definitely something to look into. When we're talking about passwords in general, I think they're a thing of the past. I think passwords, we're here for a long time. I think they're going to stay here in terms of a first layer of security. But again, that second really effective layer of security is some form of biometric authentication. Microsoft's version is Windows Hello. I'll talk a little bit later about a potential replacement for Windows Hello if you're using a shared computer, because obviously this Hello function is tied to one user for one computer. But if you have, let's say, a computer that is used by 10 people inside your organization, what can I do in that case? And that's where I'll touch on that a little bit later on today. Okay. Any questions on Windows Hello, biometric authentication? something's confusing, you guys just are curious about something, anything else I can elaborate further on? Okay, you guys, no worries. Let me know if anybody has any questions. Always happy to help. Okay, so inside of our environment, I want you guys to be able to see your actual Outlook. So go ahead and open up maybe just a new tab. I'm going to type in office.com. Okay. If you didn't know this, when you go to office.com, you're going to be able to get access to your entire suite of tools here inside of Microsoft 365. In this specific case, I have my suite of tools here on office.com, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up Outlook. So go ahead and click on the Outlook icon here inside of office.com. Okay, so go ahead and get through this. I'm just going to click on the X and we're good to go. What I want everybody to do is I want everybody to scroll down. We're looking for an email from supposedly Alex Wilbur, okay, that says important statement of work. Right away, what you'll notice is that this looks a little weird because, hey, guess what? It might be Alex Wilbur from my organization, but hold up, the face is not the same. Why does this face look different? The reason is this is actually a phishing attempt. Okay, but again, something that I mentioned earlier, everybody inside of each organization has somebody who's going to be willing to click on the link. But, what are some, simple ways that I know, okay, this is problematic? Number one, like we mentioned, the face does not look right. This doesn't look like a user that was actually Alex in my environment. I can clarify that because I know that this email does not match my coworker's email. So automatically that should be a massive red flag. But again, some people are busy, they're stressed out, they might not fully see that. And so what Microsoft is trying to do here for you is they're trying to be your advocate for managing the different potential threats here that come through your email. Number one, if a phishing attempt matches what they've seen previously been used before, it automatically is going to get taken out of your inbox. You're not even going to see it. It's going to be quarantined. However, like I said, threats are constantly evolving. They're constantly changing. So there may be some new types of phishing attacks that come through your inbox that Microsoft hasn't recognized just yet. However, it can recognize just in general when there is any type of malware present in the email. And so what you'll see here is that, okay, maybe you didn't notice it was Alex. Maybe you didn't notice the email was wrong. And maybe you didn't even notice that it says this sender's not on your safe senders list. If you missed all of that completely, you still have this as well to look at. Because what Microsoft did with this email is it actually did what's called 0-hour auto purge. It got a malware notification that said that it detected it in one or more of the attachments included inside of this email. And so it's putting this message up here to basically let you know, hey, don't touch anything. This is a risky phishing attempt. Okay, it's taking all those tasks and it's still doing all that work for you to make sure it's protecting you as much as possible. But again, what's the rule of thumb? Every organization has somebody who will click on the link. So let's say I went ahead and I clicked on the link. Okay, so I went here, I ignored everything already that they already did for me, and I just went ahead and I clicked on the link. What's beautiful about the way that Microsoft structures their processes is that they make it as difficult as possible for you to cause problems for your organization. What I mean by that, if you notice, not only did it already give you all those warnings, on top of that, it recognized the link that had malware present. And what it did is that it went ahead and it scanned it and it blocked it and it created a brand new link associated with this URL. So every time this URL actually was chosen, what it did is that it redirects that email to a safe link. This safe link specifically is this page that says this website has been classified as malicious. This is a safe site where you're not going to have any problems. But again, it's going to give you another recommendation that you don't open this website as it might contain some, potential threats to it. So, Microsoft is really going above and beyond, trying to make it as easy and as simple as possible for you to protect yourself from anybody inside your organization. And so, this is something to consider. I'm going to go ahead and put another poll here just to keep everybody engaged in the call. This is something to think about. Is your staff trained on how to identify specific phishing attacks? I think this is something that you need to take very seriously. It's something that, number one, is probably the primary way that people get themselves in trouble when it comes to security, because this is a very easy way for people to go ahead and spoof credentials. But on top of that, could be, a way for people to try and hack your, specific device, hack your specific organizational data. So if you haven't done any kind of training internally in terms of how to identify phishing attacks, how to really make that focus a big piece of what you do here in business, definitely something you want to do. And I have my colleague here, Sherman, just joined us here today, gracious enough in the velvet suit, looking good. You have something you want to say. Go ahead, Sherman.
Great. Thank you, Andres. Yeah, I want to give you a little bit of an anecdote here. So I worked for Microsoft for 5.5 years, and we went through this security training, gosh, about 2.5 years ago, when it first came out. And, we went through the whole thing. Everybody had to get certified. We're at Microsoft. And then they did this simulated attack. They actually literally created a simulated attack and sent it out to everybody. And what's interesting about it, and I'm not proud, I'll say this, they set it up where it's like, hey, your IT, needs to work with you, they created the email look exactly like it, but if you were to hover over, the to from, right, they spoofed that, right? They spoofed it from, but then when I clicked on it, what came up was the exact GUID that showed the way that Microsoft, when we access things. So it was a special GUID, right? But they just recreated that like this inside of this. And, I made the mistake, and I was one of like 10 out of the 100 people that went through it. Oh my gosh, did I get grief for like 6 months, at Microsoft. I tell the story even now because people are like, well, sure, really? You're going to tell that? I'm like, yeah, and I'm going to tell that because, even at Microsoft, after we went through all of that, it's still easy, okay, to just misnome it. So this is a really cool feature inside of, M365 and using these things that you can actually create this. Some people say, oh, well, this is going to cause problems, or, people don't like this. Well, frankly, it's more of a kind of I laughed at it afterwards, at first, but it's a good exercise, because it's like the constant training model with inside of security. What are the top 4 things you have to do with security? One of them is constantly educating and constantly, testing your environment, but also testing your people. And if you let them know in the very beginning, it's all about security. We're going to be doing some testing here. Let people know a little bit, and I bet you'll find some people that you can then help with training. So,
absolutely. Good point there, Sean. I'm glad you mentioned that. I can actually show you where you'd be able to do that. If you guys remember this first dashboard where we were here for the actual security suite for SecureScore, there's this button right here that says Attack Simulation Training. This is exactly what Sherman was talking about. There's a couple things that you can do here. Number one that I think is the most relevant is the actual, simulated phishing attack. I think that's a really easy way to not only educate people, but also, kind of identify where are the risks, internally for my organization. On top of that, though, you can also do a couple other things. You can do some attacks where they try and overwhelm passwords so that they're using AI basically try and crack passwords that your employees are using. So if they're using very simple, very easy passwords, like let's say, my last name is Osigera. Let's say, for example, my password was just, my last name with maybe one number. They're going to be able to quickly identify that and essentially create rules in place that you're not able to do things like that. So, again, I think what Sherman was alluding to, the consistent training and the consistent ability to make sure that not only are you protecting yourself, but you're also educating yourself. I mean, we were having this conversation earlier about how Microsoft is getting these billions of signals and how security is changing, from day to day. And so if you're not evolving with it, not only are you going to get left behind, but you're going to put yourself at risk. And so again, I'm going to continue hammering down, this is exactly why you want to be able to connect yourself and protect yourself by leveraging cloud providers who are really, adept and really, exceptional when it comes to protecting IT infrastructures. So, that's my little piece on phishing. Any questions on that? Any questions about the attack simulation? Anything else? Want to make sure I open this up as well and let everybody, give some feedback too. So if you guys have some questions, any comments, very open to it. I'll take a quick pause. I'll take a drink.
And this is actually one of the things that groupware can do for you, is help enable, and that's kind of where, you know, one of the things they've really invested in training their folks and making sure that they have the latest and greatest certifications with M365 certs and whatnot. This could be an engagement where you say, hey, I'd like to get a little bit more information, you know, about this. And it could be part of a secure score assessment, but we can talk about attack simulation training to help you do that. I think Francis is typing something. Francis, if you want to just come off of mute, that's fine too. You let us know. Okay, no problem.
Perfect. Okay, I see a message.
Oh, okay. No problem, Francis.
Okay, no worries, Francis.
Got back in. Okay, cool. Okay.
Perfect. Okay, so you know, a couple of the things I wanted to cover today. Number one specifically is the concept of shadow IT. Has anyone ever heard of shadow IT? Have any idea what that is and would be willing to share? Anybody? Okay, no worries. Let me get into it. You know, the concept of shadow IT is basically, if I'm just in really high level terms, is the idea that there's applications or there's resources or whatever it might be that are getting used by people inside of your organization that are not necessarily approved by IT. This is something that's relevant for you because, you know, no matter what steps you're taking when it comes to security, if people are using specific applications that are not actually supposed to be used, you're putting yourself at risk, right? Because now, if they're using a company device for that and they use an application that for some reason has you know, some piece of malware, now any of that company data that's currently sitting on that device is at risk. And so, you know, we want to be able to use Microsoft Cloud App Security in order to manage the security for our specific applications. We can decide, you know, what kind of applications do we want to allow internally for our organization? When do we want to allow these applications to be approved? What type of steps do we want to take? And what metrics can we use to not only analyze what's getting used, but to block any potential misuse of applications? I'll show you an example here of somebody who is supposed to be at lunch. Okay, so let's say they've got here, they open up their computer and they're done with, you know, work until through lunch. So they go ahead and they go to the App Store. They're planning a vacation. Okay, I'm setting the stage here. They want to go to Peru to go see some of the beautiful, you know, scenery out there. And so as they're planning this, they want to go ahead and they want to use an application called Trivago. You might have used it before. Supposed to give you some good deals for travel. And so the thing about it is, because this is a personal device, the company does not allow Trivago to be, sorry, it's a company-owned device. The company does not allow them to actually use Trivago on that specific device. And so what happens as he goes and tries to download it, he goes ahead and gets the download. But once he actually tries to use it, you notice that this download has actually been blocked specifically by the system administrator. Again, you know, depending on your specific needs, on the type of data that you're housing on, what specific regulatory requirements you might have to meet, you're going to be able to make that decision as to what applications are allowed, what applications are not allowed, and, you know, ultimately being able to not only set those policies in place, but be able to use automation to make sure those happen. So, you know, these are other things that you can do inside of Microsoft 365 that you definitely want to keep in consideration, because as things change, as things evolve, we want to make sure that we're only using the correct type of information for our specific business needs. Okay, so, you know, that we talked about configuring things for phishing. We talked about protecting against specific applications. We showed you how you can protect your documents using Azure Intune and information protection by setting specific policies and rules in place. We covered Secure Score. One other thing I wanted to quickly cover here was the idea of whether or not you can't use Windows Hello for whatever reason. Does anybody here in the group, if you wouldn't mind sharing, do you guys have let's say somebody on your team who shares a laptop at a job site, or do you have any kind of frontline workers that are using the same device? Anybody have that example here on the call today? I'd love to speak with you just very shortly, if you would be willing to share.
So anything would be great too. These classes, I think, if we help, group think, right, and group share, then we can kind of all learn a little bit better. So anything would be really great, so that we can continue, and then know if you're feeling good about it, we can move to the next step.
Well, nobody's willing to share. I can give an example from a previous class. I had somebody who spoke up and they let me know that they actually do a lot of development for specific buildings, right? And so they have basically the people in charge, all those managers are going from site to site, and they're all signing into different devices across, the spectrum of their different work capacity. And so the reason this is relevant is because we were talking about the idea of biometric authentication, right? We were talking about being able to enable Windows Hello in order to protect access to your specific device that's company owned, and making sure that only the appropriate parties are actually getting access to that device. However, right, there's a couple situations where you're not going to be able to manage that. You might have, for example, a device that's shared by 10 people in your organization. Okay, that's the easy example I just talked about. Or another example is maybe you have some older hardware that doesn't have any type of biometrics enabled automatically. But before you make that large investment into the hardware, you want to be able to still use this biometric authentication in some way, in a way that's cheaper right away up front. And so this is where the idea that Microsoft came up with was the Fido 2 key. So if I go ahead and I just show this quick PowerPoint here, okay, what this is it's just a USB, okay? This USB, however, has a specific scanning tool that's a part of it, okay? Specifically, this actually scans fingerprints. And so what you're able to do is it's a portable key, okay? And each of your fingerprints, that biometric key, is tied to your specific account in Azure Active Directory, so that every time you go ahead and you sign in and you federate using that biometric PIN, you're then going to go ahead and get immediate access to your Microsoft 365 suite, right? So that, say, for example, I go to the job site, I have my key, I plug it into the computer, I scan my fingerprint, and then I have access to my suite of tools. And then Sherman comes, let's say 3 hours later after I'm done using the device, he has his own key that's tied to his account, he plugs it in, he scans his fingerprint, and now he has access to his personal account, right? This is how we can really make things work and really make things work effectively. I'll show you just so you can visually see it. Similar to Windows Hello, it's going to ask you to go ahead and touch your security key once you sign in. And as soon as you're in, you have the opportunity to use single sign-on and get access to your entire suite of applications on the computer. Really that simple. I think it's, one of those tools that really helps people, if they feel like they're getting left behind by technology, at least adopt a piece that will help them use that multi-factor authentication capabilities to shore up their environment as much as possible. So, I just want to share that with you because I personally think, that's one of the coolest tools here inside of the security suite that you can adopt and implement relatively quickly if there's a need for it. I'm going to pause there. Sherman, I'm not sure if you want to add anything else in there, or if there's any other questions for me from the group, please, I'd love to have a conversation on security, on anything you guys would like to cover.
Okay, maybe we call down and just see, or maybe even Dan, Dan Bryant from GroupWare is on, and Dan, are you there? Can you hear us?
Dan, I think, left his audio for a minute, but I can get him back.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's okay. Well, I just want to kind of, come in here, maybe Arnie Francisco or Janet Lowe. Any other thoughts or any feedback you'd like to provide here? We'd love to hear what your thoughts are, or security questions. Okay, we got a quiet group here today. We're really struggling here. We're really trying. So, all right, Andres, let's continue.
Yeah. So, in terms of information, I think if people aren't asking too many questions, I've been able to get through pretty much the majority of my content. But what I will say is I wanted to go ahead and see if this actual rule that we put in place earlier has actually went ahead and, published itself across our entire suite of tools. If you remember, we published this sensitivity label. I believe it was around maybe 25 minutes ago. Usually it'll take anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes to actually go ahead and happen inside of your environment. So I'm praying here that we have just enough time in between so that I can actually demonstrate what this looks like. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. All this is right, we're going to be basically assuming, okay, let's say we have a social security number that we're trying to protect, and this document, this document has, the number right here. So we have SSN 078 05 1120. I promise you this is not a real number. But let's say we have this here on the document. I go ahead and save this. I'll go ahead and save this to my PC. We'll call this the test. We'll go ahead and press save and cross our fingers. I hope it's already loaded up inside the environment. The fact that it's taking a little longer gives me hope. Boom! You see that, you guys? This is the power of the Microsoft 365 suite, using automation, artificial intelligence to constantly identify potential threats. You notice as soon as I saved it, this document was encrypted and automatically watermarked with the phrase confidential, as you saw we put in place here for these specific documents. So, this thing definitely does work. It's one of those things where, if you want to make sure you're protecting yourself as much as possible, not only do you need to actively be, researching and understanding the latest threats in the industry, but also putting steps in place where you're automating your security practices and making sure that documents, again, are protecting themselves. One of the coolest features, in my personal opinion, here inside of Microsoft 365. So cool stuff. Is there any questions for us? I know we've been asking a bunch of people. I know I know Francis, you've been relatively you've said a couple things. I'm not sure, Francis, if you had any questions for us that you might want to share with the group.
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, no worries.
Francis, if you wouldn't mind, how do you feel about this lab? I mean, was this informative to you? Did you learn some new things? You feel like good takeaways?
As I said earlier, I'm going in and out of internet. We're having severe storms here in California. I don't know if it's just local to San Francisco or not, but so I'm having a little bit internet troubles. It's going in and out, but no, Andres, you're very great to follow. So that's what I've been kind of doing. But yeah, I think it's invaluable information. I mean, it's all something that we have to be concerned with. I know I am, especially that I'm working at home now and I have my personal devices connected with my work devices, and it's a little scary,
Yeah, right. It's a lot scary. One other anecdote I'd like to kind of share with the folks here. Everything's about identity and geolocation. And I'm sure Andres may have already said this, but if he didn't, I'll just repeat it. But identity and geolocation, one new algorithm that Microsoft has implemented about a year ago was to basically block any user who likes to spoof their IP address. And that's these folks that are using the Onion browser or the Tor browser, like the bad actors. That's kind of really been a big thing. And so Microsoft kind of understood that and like, well, how do we mitigate this? Because if you don't want to say who you are and you don't want to say where you're from, I think the posture now is, well, you don't get in. So that's why it's so important to turn on these things, such as the multi-factor authentication, the single sign-on. If you use Azure Active Directory, it's very, very inexpensive. It's basically on top of your domain controller, okay? But you're using Microsoft, authentication, right? And their rules and their ways of saying, okay, well, a user comes into the environment and they sign on. Well, we're going to compare them, the users where they're at, and where if they are typically logging in from San Francisco. If it's like San Francisco, San Francisco, San Francisco, and all of a sudden it's an Eastern European block nation with non-extradition charges or availability, it blocks it. And that's what's so cool about it. There's a lot of things, and last thing I'm going to mention too is there's so many different organizations that offer virtual antivirus, different types of things. So you have the applications such as the Norton antivirus and McAfee and different ones, but then you also have the on-premise ones such as like Fortinet devices, right? Well, a majority, and then the last thing I'm going to mention here is you also have organizations that are using VPN. Well, if you turn on Azure Active Directory, okay, inside of your Microsoft 365 license that you probably already have, so it's not like it's an increase in cost, you can get rid of VPN altogether. You no longer have that. You don't have the issues with that. So we can get rid of VPN because we use Azure Active Directory to get in. You're using the latest and the most updated, Azure Defender, advanced threat protection, a lot of these things that Microsoft is now providing. You're already paying for a lot of it. And I think one of the ideas is if you want like a secure score assessment, work with Groupware, and they can then highlight those things and figure out what can you take out, because you're probably already paying for a lot of the stuff that you're triple, double, triple, or quadruple paying for some of these things, which then also causes issues, with working together. So I just want to provide that as kind of like a thought process. What else do we think about, or how else do we look about it? But using Secure Score, using a secure assessment, looking at what you're already paying for inside of Azure, knowing this last thing, the 99% of all virus related type of technologies and companies, do you know who they get their patches from? They get them from Microsoft, because Microsoft is number 2 tech company in the world, with over 6,000 people working inside there. So why pay and go through third-party tools when you can get the best in breed or best in class, and you're probably already paying for it? So that's the thing to think about. Back to you, Andres.
Yeah, I think we covered most of the content, but maybe something I can just leave you with, because I mentioned, I heard Francis mention the device capabilities, right? Number one, if you have Windows Hello enabled on the devices, I think that's a good first step. But some concerns that a lot of people have is endpoint protection, right? What happens if my device gets lost or gets stolen? What's going to happen to all the data from the company that's currently sitting on that device? And so one of the things that you might think about as an organization is the idea of Windows Virtual Desktop. One of the great things about this new feature is it's using virtualization technology essentially to give every single user their own account inside of your directory. And what it's doing is that you're actually connecting to this Windows Virtual Desktop to get access to your own workstation, so that now every time you're working on something, every time you're accessing company data and company information, you're accessing this through the cloud, through the virtual machine that this specific desktop is tied to. So that every time you download information and you host it, all that data and all that company, sensitive content is not getting saved on the actual device. It's getting saved in the cloud. Right. And I think that's really one of the primary benefits of WVD, on top of, the ability to work anywhere remotely from any part of the world and still have access to your entire suite of tools, your entire suite of applications that you use for your business. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste a link into the chat window for everybody. I encourage you to look into this opportunity. I think it's one of the hottest things on the market. That's really cool. I'm not sure if you wanted to mention anything else, Sherman, but I think it's something that people should definitely take a look at.
No.
I know Dan has re-entered the meeting from Groupware and would love to say a few things too as well.
Perfect.
He's back.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Hi. Good morning, everybody. Just want to thank everybody for showing up to the workshop. Andres did a fantastic job explaining everything. Really appreciate all the hard work you're putting into it. I'm so a little quick intro here. So I'm Dan Bryant with Groupware. I'm one of the senior solution architects on the cloud team. And we just wanted to make sure that if you guys have any other questions after this is over, please reach out to Sherman or to myself or to your account manager to be able to help assist you with any questions you guys have. cybersecurity is a huge thing. It's in the news all over the place now. So, every organization needs to be focused on, securing their environment, making sure that everything is covered, and you don't have holes in your environment. So all these different pieces, like what Andres was explaining, was Secure Score, the WVD. Huge fan of WVD, Andres. It's a great product as well. So just wanted to say thank you, everybody, for showing up. Appreciate the attendance. And if you guys have any other future or any questions, anything like that, please reach out to your account manager, Sherman, Andres, myself, and we'll hopefully be able to get those answered for you.
Absolutely. And I put out a poll for everybody. If you guys wanted to make sure we do follow up with you directly, please make sure you go ahead and select yes for that modern workplace assessment. We'll be following up and making sure we can help you in whatever way we can. So always a pleasure, you guys. I see Frances is typing, so I'll wait until she finishes. But, I think ultimately, if I can sum everything up together, security is ever evolving, it's ever changing. And so, I like to position myself with leaders in the industry that are constantly getting billions of insights and allowing us to take advantage of that big brain. And that's what Microsoft is in this specific case. And I think that's why, you're going to see a lot of benefits and a lot of reasons why that switch makes total sense for you in case you're not already employing them. So we're always here as a resource to, help you make sure that you keep as secure as possible, and just be here for any other concerns when it comes to IT. We want to be a resource and a partner with you. So as always a pleasure to have you on, and thank you so much for coming and taking some time today.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank
Andres.
you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna stay on for a couple minutes in case anybody has any questions. Okay, I'll go ahead and I'll end the recording here, you guys. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.